All right, so this is our last little example that we'll work out that goes with section 3 and all these kind of parent graphs and things like that. And it's another piecewise problem, but this time it's a piecewise problem that doesn't necessarily work out in a shape that we would recognize. And it's just giving us practice at looking at just different parts of a function. That's the thing that we need to understand out of all the piecewise work, is how to break a function down and look at different increments of that function. So what we've got here is x squared when x is less than or equal to 0, and the square root of x when x is greater than 0. So we're going to have two things going. We're going to have an x squared part, and we're going to have a square root of x part. With the square root of x squared, we're looking at numbers that are less than or equal to 0. So when I set up my table of points, I'm going to let x be here, I'm going to let y be here, and I'm going to go with 0, -1, -2, -3. You can keep going if you want to. And then for the square root of x, I'm going to look at numbers that are larger than 0. And we can include 0 on this as long as we understand that 0 isn't actually included. But we go right up to, but don't touch. All right, so what we're going to have is when 0 is put in for x squared, you get 0. When -1 is put in for x squared, you get 1. When -2 is put in for x squared, you get 4. When -3 goes in for x squared, you get 9. So that's going to look something like 0, which is included. And then at -1, we're at +1. And then when we're at 2, we're at 4. And then when we're at 3, we're at 9, so that's off the graph. So it's going to look something like this right here. And then when you look at the blue side, you're looking at the square root of 0, which is 0, the square root of 1, which is 1, the square root of 2, which is like a really long decimal, 1.14, the square root of 3, I'm not even sure what that is. So let's go out one more to 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. And so when we graph this side again, we're at 0, so we would just put an open circle there. And it turns out that we fill in that spot. And then I go to the 0.11, to 1.4, 1.14 something, and then out to 4, I'm at 2. So maybe that's square root of 2 is 1.4, which looks like it might work a little better. All right, so then what I'm going to do is just connect these guys right here. And there's your piecewise graph. And again, we can talk about all kinds of things with this graph. Does it have a maximum or minimum? Does it have domain? What is its domain and range? We can look at all these kinds of things. Is it continuous or not continuous? So those are things that you need to think about when you look at that. And if you have a question with one of those types of things, please ask. But we spent a lot of time talking about how to analyze a graph, and so you should be able to do that, even with something that doesn't look quite as easy. But that's how you do a piecewise.